I think that, another person brought up the fact of why do these congressmen and senators have to spend so much time in Washington?
Yeah.
Why don't they go back to their districts and work their state? I mean, for some reason, they get elected, they go to Washington, and they say they're going to do what we want to do, and then they do what they want to do. Who wants to do what some of these people do in various states? What sense does it make? It makes no sense because they're in Washington and they're drinking that black tea, that literally the tea that makes them think that they're part of the deep state. They've got to be part of the brotherhood over there. And they forget all about their people that they represent. And we sit there and go like, this guy Ruben Gallegos in Arizona, he's up there making commercials that he cares about the border. And every time, I hope people are listening to this, in Arizona, this idiot has voted against every single bill to protect the border, but he goes on TV with some dumb sheriff out here, and all he does is say, oh yeah, I protect the border. He does nothing, zero. He walks out on his wife when she's 9 months pregnant, 2 weeks before she's delivering a baby because he fell in love with some gal in Washington, D.C. And then we're supposed to think he's this stand-up guy. It's the same thing as Mark Kelly, our senator. This wonderful human being plays all the time on his wife, Gabby, who's a really nice lady who got shot in the head and still alive. And then he goes home to his girlfriend where he lives 2 miles away from his wife.
Whoa, wait a minute. I didn't know that.
Well, now you just...
Wait a minute. Did you know this, Wes?
I didn't know it.
Huh?
I didn't know it, no.
And so, I'm not, we say I'm done.
You have this documented, Michael?
I don't have it documented. I heard it on the news, from Good News, on the blogs.
Wow.
On the blogs. And I think they had it down. They had some pictures. But all I'm trying to get to is these people don't represent us, Brandon. If they're back in the States, they'd have to sit back and deal with their people. I don't know if you remember when all those senators and congressmen came back home with all these problems were going on with Obama, and they didn't want to have town halls because they didn't want to hear the complaints of the people.
Yep, I remember that.
Literally.
So let me move to this next one. The next one is Dell's founder and CEO unloads $1.2 billion in stock. This seems to have be a trend the last few months with CEOs and the leaders of major corporations. Wes?
Yeah, absolutely. And, some people say, oh, well, they're just taking profits. They still have a lot of shares left in those companies, which is true, but it is a signal. These people aren't multi-millionaires and billionaires because they're dumb. They see what's happening. They know that our government reports bogus numbers and then, revises them a couple of months later, and it really makes no news whatsoever. They know what the chances are of the Fed pulling off a soft landing. They're familiar with the 10-year, 2-year yield curve and how that inversion was the longest on history, and it just started unwinding. And that's, you brought up the mortgage rates going up. That's because of the 10-year. We can talk more about that later. But these people aren't dumb. They're taking profits off the table. They're getting out. And a lot of it has to do with they see what's on the horizon. I mean, he sold 10 million shares worth $1.22 billion. He's in total unloaded 23 million shares just in 2024 alone. So Dell, NVIDIA, all these, Warren Buffett has $300 billion in cash on the sidelines waiting for the big correction. And, what's the saying? Don't listen to what they're saying, watch what they're doing, and people should pay attention.
There's 3 other things that tie into this too, and Wes is exactly right, but 3 other things tie in. First of all, these guys are scared to death that Kamala wins. If she wins, their long-term capital gains.
She's not going to win, but they're not going to let Trump go to the White House.
She's going to get annoyed. That's what you think. At the end of the day, whatever the circumstances, they're afraid of long-term capital gain. That's going to go up big time. Brandon, could double. So they want to get their money out. Additionally, what's interesting about Dell in particular is here's a guy who wanted to buy back his company private. A year ago, all we were hearing is he wanted to take his company private again. Why does he want to get rid of it now? He wants to get out of it because he's smelling the problems that the third thing is the economy. The U.S. money reserve issue, his ability to do business overseas in the U.S. dollar. He's basically saying to you, a year ago I wanted to buy my company back. I don't want to buy it back anymore. I just want to go live a rich life. That's what he's telling you. I'm done.
Okay. By the way, we now have the dock workers strike. I guess the dock workers strike has been resolved for until January 15th. I guess they were they
took my advice from last night.
They gave them some kind of pay increase for a period of time. I haven't seen the full details, but apparently the dock workers strike is off for now. It's on hold, or they're all back to work until January 15th is what we're reading. So there you go.
Right before.
I'm sure Kamala showed up with Pete Buttigieg on her hip, and they sat down at a table and hammered out a deal. That's probably what happened. It's
probably, yeah, exactly. U.S. government adds. What is that number? 204. What is that number? 204 billion. The national debt on the first day of the new fiscal year. 204 billion. U.S. government's massive pile of debt is reaching fresh heights as new fiscal year begins. Treasury Department's debt to the penny database shows the national debt rose from 35 trillion on September 30th to 35 trillion some odd more on October 1st. That's a jump of 204 billion in a span of just 24 hours. But we're out of money. We're out of money for Americans. We can print it and bring it into reality in seconds for what we want to spend it on, but none for the American people. I wonder if this is because that is Trump country up there, or is this because they want the land? On my 1 o'clock show today, I played a news report from NBC talking about all the lithium, all the quartz and all the lithium up in that area. Is this what they're after? Are they looking to get these people off that property and take that land? Or is this a natural disaster that occurred naturally? Or was it manipulated weather? I mean, there's a lot of different theories out there. But is this partly in order to irritate the American people? I think they stole the 2020 election. I think they're going to steal it again, in my opinion. I think they do everything they can to insult the American people. I think they're trying to gaslight the American people. They're looking for reaction from the American people to justify the dystopian laws and crackdown they want to put in place. I mean, nothing else makes sense, does it, Michael?
Not at all. You're absolutely right. And what really is bothersome is I'm really tired. The only people that I think is actually news people is like Worldview Weekend and other places where you get the true news. What's wrong with the true news? I'm sure a guy like Sam Donaldson, who was on ABC, great reporter, he went after Biden when he lied at that election when he tried to run for president in the 80s.
Yep.
He wouldn't stop on him. He nailed him with all of his lies. He went after him. Ted Koppel, the same type of guy. These guys don't exist anymore. We got this gal in CBS who was one of the moderators. She gets paid $6 million a year. She's got a $65,000 a year clothing budget. She's got two hair people. I don't think that Edward R. Murrow had that. He had a cigarette in a chair, okay? But he told us the truth. David Huntley Brinkley, these people told us the truth. Walter Cronkite, I think he was the beginning of the bad press. He's a sellout. But some of these great newscasters out there did a wonderful job, don't exist anymore. I can't think of anybody except, thankfully, people like Brannon and other places where you can get real news, because this is just horrific, literally. It's beyond. You listen to the news and you know it's a lie. You listen to these people, they manipulate everything that goes on. They don't tell the American people the truth. And the problem is that some of these people believe it. It's just, that's the killer. They don't do their homework. They don't get online and check. They believe it. I'm done.
I'm out. Let's go to the next article. NVIDIA CEO sold over 700 million in stock. So there's another one. So we got Dell founders selling 1.2 billion, NVIDIA 700 million.
Jamie Dimon sold some.
I think it was a while back, a couple of months ago, we showed a chart. We had a chart showing all of these top executives and board members from these companies, showing how many shares they had personally bought in the company versus how many they had sold. I'll see if I can dig that up again, find that, because it was very alarming, and it's still continuing today.
Yep.
And this money distribution in North Carolina and Georgia, you asked about, the counties, different areas having trouble getting money. Well, we know, Brandon, that our government is weaponized on every single level. And they can look at counties and they know the numbers, how many Democrats live here, how many Republicans. It wouldn't shock me one bit if this current administration said, well, let's send money over here, but let's not send anything over here. They pick and choose, and they're going to back their team. Instead of the American people being a team and being united, they talk about uniting the country every election cycle, which they destroy and put people against each other. I could see that happening very realistically. You guys get some money, you don't, and that's a big reason too. Think about, we go to a digital currency and they know your spending habits and who you contribute money to, and they know everything about you, your religion, you name it. They can turn your money on and off if we go digital. They have total control over you. So I'm done.
All right. That's well said, Wes.
He's learning. That's right.
He's learning. That's right, Michael. All right, let's go to this little. Let's go to this little report. Here we go.
To try and time this market, especially if you're someone that maybe can wait a little bit and doesn't have to move right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there are pros for buying now. We're at that seasonal slowdown sweet spot for buyers. So there's less competition, which can make it easier to snag a deal on a home. At the same time, you might see lower rates if you rate into the spring, but you might have to offset those lower rates with more competition and better prices. In essence, I don't think buyers can go wrong either way. I think if you're shopping and you have a good idea of what you want and you find it and it fits within your budget, it makes sense to move forward. If rates do indeed drop further, that may create an opportunity to refinance. But in the meanwhile, you'll have started building up equity. So buyers are in a really good position right now, the best position that they've seen in quite some time in the housing market.
And let's say you're someone that really is anxious to move, needs to move right now. What should be on that checklist when it comes to looking at the various options out there and really maximizing savings as well?
Yeah, so if you're looking to get a good deal, Realtor.com recently did some research looking at listing descriptions. Sellers that put the phrase price to sell or other similar value signals in the listing description are in fact more willing to make a deal, and their pricing tends to be better. So shoppers can get an 8.5% or $38,000 discount below the median price if they're looking for terms like price to sell. And if you don't want to wait for lower mortgage rates, there are tips to lower your mortgage rate. The number one that results in the biggest savings is to shop around among mortgage lenders, and that can net you a better mortgage rate than just going with the first offer.
All right. Comment on that, please, Michael?
Well, I think it's a wonderful story, but it ain't going to work. The young buyers right now, even with their $25,000, their payments on these houses that are so overpriced right now are going to be ridiculous. It's not helping the Gen Zs. It's not helping the young people. You've got to save, and if you want to get a mortgage, and I have a friend of mine who legitimately owns one of the largest mortgage companies. I grew up with him. I'm not going to mention his name. I grew up with him, and we were talking the other day about what's going on, and his whole statement to me is that young people have to have certain criteria. The money that they have in the bank has to be aged. Their credit has to be at a certain level. They don't just willy-nilly let you have a mortgage anymore. But these realtors and everybody else want you to come in and get turned down. I mean, literally, and getting your mother or father to give you extra money isn't going to work right now, because that money has to have aged in your account. So if you're thinking you're going to buy a house, you better have mommy or daddy give you the money now and wait about a year, because they're not going to do it if it just got there 2 weeks ago. They want to see stability. They want to see certain things. They don't hand out money as easily as they did. But these interest rates are still bad. And I think when an election is over and based on what they're doing, I believe, like you stated, Brandon, that interest rates are going to go up further. They have to.
Yep. Michael? Wes?
Yeah, and I think inventory at the end of the day, rates go down, inventory is still going to be an issue, but that 10-year yield that's unwound, that rate has consistently been creeping up since it uninverted, and the mortgage rates are heavily based off of that 10-year yield. So even though the Fed's dropping rates, that mortgage rates, which they already are starting to creep back up again. So I don't think we're going to anytime soon be in the mid fives or low fives for sure. If anything else, these rates could start to continue to creep up. So, but at the end of the day, we still have an inventory problem as well. So,
here we go. Fed's papers loses top the $200 billion mark. Fed's paper losses, top the $200 billion mark. U.S. Federal Reserve losses crossed the 200 billion point this week, according to data released on Thursday by the central bank. Now, this is interesting because this is a collection of private banks. Do you really think they lost $200 billion, Michael?
Absolutely.
So how are they going to make it back up? Because this is a group of private banks. The banks always win in the end. How will they make it up?
How do they make it up? Because they print it, just like you said earlier. They can get the money from the Fed, and the money can be printed, and they sit back and tie it into the derivative market, and they do what's called the Enron move, where they just move the money around. It's like a shell game. They go from hither to yon to make the numbers work, and by the time you can try to figure out what they did, it's already done. The Federal Reserve is a private entity. It's not a public entity. They really don't work for us. They should be totally, if this country is going to go forward, they got to be gone, literally. And I do not know if Trump has the ability. If he did it, we already know that if these people get in, they're part of that same little group. And Jerome Powell's got to be biting his nails looking at some of the stuff that's going on right now, because it ain't working, his plan. And I think they cut a deal, as it might be, with the unions, again, to try to get things done because they wanted to hide things for the election. It's another political move. But it's a shell game. When they do transfers at the end of the night, how they adjudicate money is overnights. At midnight Eastern time, money starts moving between banks. And you're trying to figure out, how do these banks cover each other? It's a shell game. And if somebody's missing something, they move the shells around, and all of a sudden everybody's hunky-dory, and we start up the next morning at 6 a.m., and everybody's happy-go-lucky and pulls up their bank account and has no idea what's been done in the background. None.
Let's go to this next one. Warren Buffett, Dave Ramsey, and John Maynard Keynes are wrong. These guys called gold, famously, Keynes did, John Maynard Keynes, barbarous relic, a term he used to denigrate the gold standard and disparage the use of gold as money. I know Dave Ramsey has really been negative on gold, but I don't know. My opinion partly is because I think he makes a lot of his money off financial planners that he promotes and does commercials for. I mean, I could be wrong, but I've heard him do commercials for financial planners.
Too.
What?
Yeah.
Well, he also gets involved with your life. He gets all your personal information from individuals that do business with him, and I find that interesting.
But he does do a lot of promotion of financial planners. I think he probably does commercials for them and stuff, whatnot. Does he? So, yeah. Wes, is that right, Wes?
He's a big Wall Street cheerleader. Yeah, he has his Dave Ramsey approved financial advisors. I'm sure they call. Dave Ramsey told me to call you, and and there's nothing wrong with that. But Dave Ramsey's great at helping people get out of debt, no doubt about that. But when it comes to financial advice, Dave Ramsey is one of these buy and hold. No matter what, don't sell anything, hold, don't change anything. Markets go up and down, and Dave Ramsey was telling people to stay the course in 2008 for the financial crisis. And you could see that coming a mile away. So I wouldn't listen to Dave Ramsey when it comes to investing. Right here, let's say Keynes disliked gold because it's restricted government spending, but the article suggests that this discipline is exactly what makes gold valuable in controlling inflation and preserving wealth. Since the U.S. left the gold standard in 1971, gold has increased in value more than both the Dow and the S&P 500. Now keep that in mind. Gold's gone up more than the Dow and S&P 500, and we don't sell it to make money. We sell it to preserve your wealth and hedge against inflation. Let's see. Then some of these guys always argue that stocks and bonds and mutual funds are a better investment for gold for making a return on your investment. Well, again, we believe in those types of investment vehicles to make money, but gold and silver is to preserve your wealth, maintain your purchasing power, and probably more than ever now, is to get some of your money off the government's radar and off the grid and outside a traditional banking system. So
there you go.
Right.
So if people want to get the free packet of information, no obligation, free packet of information on precious metals, what do they need to do, Wes?
Just text or call. You can text 602-558-8585. Text your name, your physical mailing address, and your email. We've got some good information we could email to you. And if you need information on protecting retirement accounts, make a note of that, and we'll get the information out to you. You do your homework, you do your due diligence. Even if you don't know the right questions to ask, Michael and I are going to cover everything from A to Z. And as we're explaining everything, that's going to lead to some questions. And we'll stop and okay, let's talk about that. So it's not like you need to be right at the door of, okay, I want to do this. Even if you have serious doubts and need some clarification, that's what we're here for.
Okay.
That's right.
Closing comment from you, Mr. Michael.
Well, it's Wes is exactly right. I was talking to two things. I had a Worldview client today who had a triple header. He lived in Florida. His home was partially destroyed in Florida. He's a Worldview weekend guy. His business is home. His major home is in, guess what? North Carolina. He lost half of his house. His business had 30% building damage, and his son lost his house 10 miles outside of Asheville. And he's sitting there listening to a guy named Mayorkas saying that FEMA is broke. How do you think he felt? And I will say this, that Wes is exactly right. What we do is boring because we go over all the details. I had somebody I talked to today, and I guess they would have liked me to just give them a 10-minute, gold's going to $10,000 an ounce approach the way other people do. Instead, I spent the time to fully educate them. Make sure he understood exactly what they were going to do and what their exposure was and what the strategy was, how we could help them through this. Because I believe, and I'll leave you with this, if you don't have gold in your portfolio in these days, it's not only financially irresponsible, it's dangerous.
It's also dangerous. There you go. Get the packet, no obligation. 602-558-8585. 602-558-8585. All right? That's the Worldview Financial Report for tonight. Tonight being, again, October 3rd, 2024. My Worldview Financial Report comes up next, and then Brandon House Live tonight. Big show. Doug Frank is going to join me. He was in the courtroom today when Tina Peters was sentenced to prison for 9 years. Chris Martinson also joins us. 62,000 studies on PubMed on the power of glutathione. It is a powerful molecule that studies show detoxes our cells. Some studies even show that, glutathione might remove mercury from our brains, help to prevent things like Alzheimer's, dementia, and Parkinson's. Now look, I'm not making claims. I'm just telling you what the research is showing about the powerful molecule glutathione. Numi is the product that contains glutathione. Melissa and I swish with this twice a day. We urge you to go to Numi.com/house1. That's Numi, NEUMI.com/HOWSE and the numeral 1. Begin finding out about the power of glutathione while also supporting this broadcast network. Thank you. Hello, I'm Brandon House. Is the government tracking you? Do they have access to all your data? Well, if you go to worldviewtalk.com, you'll find out about a cell phone company that, does not store your data. They don't do that. This is what they're known for. They don't store your data. You have privacy. You're not being tracked. That's why a lot of folks are turning to worldviewtalk.com. You'll find their prices are very competitive. All the details are there at worldviewtalk.com. Again, worldviewtalk.com. Oh, while you're there, not only do they have cell phones that aren't tracking you, you can find out about how to get a satellite phone. Should the whole system go down and you want to communicate with a family member or a loved one, you might want to have a satellite phone. Or how about their solar generators? They have great solar generators. Check them all out right now. Worldviewtalk.com. Worldviewtalk.com. Tonight on the Worldview Report, the Biden-Harris regime make it clear where their priorities stand with the strike dock workers and not American consumers who are likely to face shortages within weeks if the strike doesn't end soon. Russia unleashes the world's largest non-nuclear bomb on Ukraine. A former Iranian president says Iran's intelligence agencies are completely infiltrated by Israeli Mossad agents. Bank of America customers find themselves locked out of their accounts or found zero money in them in a computer glitch that stretched to multiple states. And a former Iranian president admits Iran's government officials are running scared after the Israeli Mossad has infiltrated the country's intelligence units. All these stories and more as the Worldview Report begins right now.
This is Worldview Report with host Brandon House. Whether it is news from the nation's capital or your state capital, from the classroom to the boardroom, from national security to national and local news that impacts you and your family, Worldview Report is your trusted source for vital and uncensored news. And now, here is Brandon House.
Good evening and welcome to the Worldview Report. Vice President Kamala Harris sided Wednesday with dock workers who launched a massive strike this week that threatens to cripple the economy. Harris said in a post to X, quote, "This strike is about fairness. Foreign-owned shipping companies have made record profits and executive compensation has grown. The longshoremen who play a vital role transporting essential goods across America deserve a fair share of these record profits," end quote. Harris also threw a barb at her opponent, accusing former President Donald Trump of making empty promises to workers and promising that she will have workers' backs and fight for an opportunity economy. The Dock Workers Union has donated more than $1.6 million to Democrats under their union president, Harold Daggett, who threatened to cripple the economy if dock workers did not get the contract they wanted. Daggett endorsed Joe Biden, but began lashing out at the White House as the strike drew near. But relations appear to be warming between the union and the administration on several fronts. Also on Wednesday, Daggett thanked Acting Labor Secretary Julie Su for speaking out in support of the striking dock workers. Su issued a statement slamming port owners for refusing, quote, to put an offer on the table that reflects workers' sacrifice and contributions to their employers' profits, end quote, as, quote, their CEOs bring in millions of dollars in compensation per year, end quote. Daggett made $728,000 last year as a union president, plus another $173,000 as president emeritus of the New Jersey local. That's what Politico reported. The strike is damaging supply chains and is likely to cause delays or even shortages of products like coffee, bananas, cars, clothing, and Christmas decorations. The union rejected a last-minute deal from port ownership, which offered the union a nearly 50% wage raise. The union had demanded higher wages and zero port automation. According to one estimate from J.P. Morgan, every day the strike continues costs the U.S. economy between $3.8 billion to $4.5 billion a day. The strike, well, it comes at a particularly difficult time when many Americans in eastern states are trying to resupply and rebuild after the devastating effects of Hurricane Helene. Joe Biden, well, he could pause this strike for 80 days under the Taft-Hartley Act. But he has indicated he has no intention of doing so. Some have speculated that the president is unwilling to go out of his way to help Harris after Democrats ousted him from the presidential ticket, while others have wondered if the administration is simply courting the union vote. Journalist Julian Assange held his first major press conference following his recent release from a British prison, and he publicly revealed that the CIA and their long arm had plotted for years to assassinate him. Assange, founder of WikiLeaks and a citizen of Australia, published documents handed to him by a U.S. Army whistleblower by the name of Bradley Manning that proved, well, embarrassing to the U.S. government. And it was concerning its policies in the Middle East and other regions of the world. Watch this.
We revealed the CIA's vast production of malware and viruses, its subversion of supply chains, its subversion of antivirus software, cars, smart TVs, and iPhones. CIA Director Pompeo launched a campaign of retribution. It is now a matter of public record that under Pompeo's explicit direction, the CIA drew up plans to kidnap and to assassinate me within the Ecuadorian embassy in London, and authorized going after my European colleagues, subjecting us to theft, hacking attacks, and the planting of false information. My wife and my infant son were also targeted. A CIA asset was permanently assigned to track my wife, and instructions were given to obtain DNA from my 6-month-old son's nappy. This is the testimony of more than 30 current and former US intelligence officials speaking to the US press, which has been additionally corroborated by records seized in a prosecution brought against some of the CIA agents involved. The CIA's targeting of myself, my family, and my associates through aggressive extrajudicial and extraterritorial means provides a rare insight into how powerful intelligence organizations engage in transnational repression. Such repressions are not unique. What is unique is that we know so much about this one due to numerous whistleblowers and to judicial investigations in Spain.
Red State reports that one of the most interesting bits of Tuesday's vice presidential debate between J.D. Vance and Tim Walz was the expression and body language displayed by the candidates. Ward Clark, writing for Red State, commented that, quote, Vance dominated. He was cool, confident, and whimsical at times. The little sideways glances into the camera with a slight smirk while Walz was speaking were priceless. And that's how you knew he was waiting to pounce. On the other hand, when Walz opened the debate, he was clearly nervous. His brows perpetually raised, staring at the moderators and into the camera with wide open, hop-toed eyes. He presented a picture of anything but confidence and command, end quote. Dr. Carol Lieberman, MD, agreed. She is a body language expert, and she gave her analysis of the debate to Fox News Digital. On J.D. Vance's performance, here's what she said. Quote, what J.D. Vance had that made him most likable and most trusted was that he was authentic. You could just say it in one word. J.D. Vance was authentic. He did big hand movements and so on, but they were just to explain what he was saying, end quote. Lieberman added, quote, J.D. Vance came across as being very steady, like you can kind of see him as a captain of the ship. And he wasn't too stiff, but you knew what you were going to get. Each time he seemed sure of himself, and so you felt like you would be safe with him. He gave an air of stability, end quote. Tim Walz, on the other hand, well, didn't come off so well, and Lieberman said, quote, with Tim Walz, he was all over the place. He was very nervous, and he also had body language signs of lying. His body language was discordant with what he was saying. It was like too much. It made you feel exhausted and scared, end quote. Then there was this awkward exchange in which Walz admitted to being a knucklehead. Watch this.
Governor Walz, you said you were in Hong Kong during the deadly Tiananmen Square protests in the spring of 1989. But Minnesota Public Radio and other media outlets are reporting that you actually didn't travel to Asia until August of that year. Can you explain that discrepancy?
Yeah, well, and to the folks out there who didn't get at the top of this, look, I grew up in small rural Nebraska, town of 400, town that you rode your bike with your buddies till the streetlights come on, and I'm proud of that service. I joined the National Guard at 17, worked on family farms, and then I used the GI Bill to become a teacher, passionate about it, a young teacher. My first year out, I got the opportunity in the summer of '89 to travel to China. 35 years ago, be able to do that. I came back home and then started a program to take young people there. We would take basketball teams, we would take baseball teams, we would take dancers, and we would go back and forth to China. The issue for that was to try and learn. Now look, my community knows who I am. They saw where I was at. They look, I will be the first to tell you, I have poured my heart into my community. I've tried to do the best I can, but I've not been perfect. And I'm a knucklehead at times, but it's always been about that. Those same people elected me to Congress for 12 years. And in Congress, I was one of the most bipartisan people, working on things like farm bills that we got done, working on veterans benefits. And then the people of Minnesota were able to elect me to governor twice. So look, my commitment has been from the beginning to make sure that I'm there for the people, to make sure that I get this right. I will say more than anything, many times I will talk a lot. I will get caught up in the rhetoric. But being there, the impact it made, the difference it made in my life, I learned a lot about China. I hear the critiques of this. I would make the case that Donald Trump should have come on one of those trips with us. I guarantee you he wouldn't be praising Xi Jinping about COVID. And I guarantee you he wouldn't start a trade war that he ends up losing. So this is about trying to understand the world. It's about trying to do the best you can for your community. And then it's putting yourself out there and letting your folks understand what it is. My commitment, whether it be through teaching, which I was good at, or whether it was being a good soldier or was being a good member of Congress, those are the things that I think are the values that people care about.
Governor, just to follow up on that, the question was, can you explain the discrepancy?